Hello and welcome back to Drawing with Mrs. Mills. I hope you're having a fantastic day and I'm really excited to do some watercolor with you today. So to get started, I have my image I transferred onto some watercolor paper. I have some water and I have my watercolors. I'm just using these student quality watercolors, the same ones I use in my classroom. They're not super fancy, but they work really well. Also, when I'm doing watercolor, I always make sure I have a paper towel in case I make a mistake, because then I can fix it. So, starting with watercolor. The trick with watercolor is, of course, you have to activate your color with water. And so let's get started. Let's start with a bright color. Our brush is clean, our water's clean, so this is a good time to start with our yellow. So activate your yellow with some water. And I always use this part as a little palette because I don't really want to just put the color as it comes off of the paint pan. I want to be able to modify it a little bit. But we'll start just with this yellow. We won't add anything to it at first. And let's go in and start to paint these petals. And I'm just trying to get a pretty solid color on there. It's pretty watery because I don't want it too dark. With watercolor, you have to let it move around a little bit. You have to just be careful with how much water you add. And a big part about watercolor is being patient, because you have to wait for sections to dry. So I'm just going to put in that yellow and let that dry a little bit. Okay. Let's do another yellow flower while I have my yellow here. And I did not pre-wet this paper. I'm working on dry paper right now. You can wet the paper if you want. But I'm going to work dry so I have a little more control over where my colors go. Alright. Let's add the yellow in the center of these flowers here. I'm going to stop with that for now. I'm going to rinse off my brush. And that's another reason I have a paper towel, because I can check and see if my brush is clean. And I'm going to do my roses. So I'm going to start with the red. So that's the red that came with my palette. But it's a little too, I want more of a corally color. So I'm going to add some orange and even a little bit of yellow. And that's going to give me more of a corally color. When you're working with watercolor, it's nice if you have a piece of scrap paper that you can test your colors on, so you know if you like them. I would like that a little brighter, so I'm going to actually add a little more of this orange, more red. I kind of just go back and forth until I have a color that I like. So let's see how this works. Let's start putting this in. And with my roses, I think I'm going to not paint them petal by petal. I'm just going to do the whole body of the flower one color, and then we'll add in details on top. There's one. Add a little more red to the next one. Remember, they don't have to be exactly the same. I'm being careful not to touch my yellow that I already put in there, because if that mixes, they're gonna run together. All right. So I'm not going for any kind of like photorealistic painting or anything. I just want to make some pretty flowers. Alright, that looks good. Right, let's make the purple. So I do have purple in here. Let's see what that looks like. Gotta activate that. It's pretty. I'm gonna add a little bit of red to it. Alright. Let's lay in these colors. This purple. I'm sort of using the colors I used in that one as a guide, which it's always a good idea if you want to plan out what you're going to paint before you do it. Okay, some of my purple. Now, I had some purple and yellow in the background, but I'm going to wait to do that. I'm going to do all the major flowers first, and then we'll do the greens, and then we'll go back and do that background stuff. Oh, I forgot a flower. So let's come back. Reactivate this color here. And paint this guy. Notice I washed my brush in between and I dried it off on the paper towel because I did not want to get purple into this color. All right, so I'm going to leave the flowers for a little while. One thing you could do, like with my yellow petals, if I wanted them a little lighter, I could take my paper towel and come in and dab some areas to get them a little lighter. And that way you almost get the shading very easily without even doing much work. All of a sudden you've got shading. All right, let's do the vase. I am going to do a different technique for the vase. I'm going to lay in some water. You can see I got some on that leaf there, which I probably don't want. So I'm going to dry that leaf. Because once we put the water onto the paper, wherever there's water, wherever it's wet, our paint's going to go. So, put some water on there. And go ahead, and I'm going to do a blue. Let's see what color blue I got here. Okay, that's my blue. I'm going to water it down a bit and let that kind of move all over the vase. And I can add some more water to it and have it move around. It's just so it gives it that really like watery look. I don't want any sharp lines. I want it to look nice and watery. Alright, I'm liking that. I realized yesterday I made my vase clear, but then I never put any of the stems inside the vase, so we'll have to do that today. That'll make a lot more sense. Now I'm going to I want to work somewhere else, but I want to work somewhere that I'm not going to mix any of my colors. So I'm going to do the table. I'm going to use this kind of purplier red and just make sure that you don't run into the vase or anywhere that you got water or it's going to blend together. All right. Now I think my flowers are pretty dry, so I can go back in with my green and do the greens. But if they're wet, remember, they're going to smush together, so be careful. All right, with the green, I don't usually like the way the green looks like right out. So I can take some already made green and I can add some yellow. Or, of course, I can take some blue and add some yellow. Either way, I can get a custom green that I like a little more. And if you add a little tiny bit of red or this orangish color, it will sort of neutralize your green a little bit and give you a more earthy green. So I'm going to go through and start with this bright green and just put these leaves and stems in. And I'm really not going for like perfect anything. I want them to look nice and bright and happy, but I don't want them to look, they don't have to look perfect. And if I want to darken up some green, I can do that too by mixing a darker green, adding more blue and less yellow. And that is a really easy way to get some depth quickly. Just come through, like, especially when I'm painting things like flowers, I like to just kind of go with the flow. If you're having trouble getting your paint to move, just add a little more water. I don't want to paint those white petals there. I'm going to put some of this background stuff in. And remember what I said about last week? I forgot to put or yesterday, not last week, I forgot to put those stems in there. So I'm going to water down some green. And I'm going to put some stems going into here. Now that is still wet, remember, so this is going to get a little crazy in there. Inside, but it's going to look all like watery and underwater, so I'm fine with that. Ooh, I like that. You even want to go with a little darker on some of the stems and just really lightly put that in there. It's underwater, so it all looks blobby, you know, that's cool. I like that. Alright, so I got most of my stems put in. I'm going to go back in with my, oh, except for that guy. Go back in with my purple and to do some of the background stuff. So rinse my brush off, get some purple. I forgot to do these little guys, let's do them. They're just like dots. They're not perfect, but that's okay. All right, let's get some purple. And I want to just fill in some of these. That was actually more blue than purple. I'm going to fill in some of these little spots back here. I think I'm going to do the same with the yellow. My yellow got a little green in it, so I'm going to wash my brush off. Come in here. Put some yellow back here. Like I said, I'm okay if these kind of get blendy. Now, once I have it to about this spot, I can decide if I want to keep it like this or if I want to go back into it and draw over it with some color pencils to do the details. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to let this dry and then we'll go back into it, I think tomorrow, because this video is probably long enough, and we'll do some details on top of what we drew today because it really needs to dry thoroughly before you put the color pencil on. If you try to draw on it with color pencil when it's wet, you're just going to make a mess. So let's let that dry and we'll come back to it tomorrow. I hope you got your paints out and tried this. It's really fun. It's one of my favorite things, and I can't wait to see what we make it look like tomorrow. Thanks, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for drawing with Mrs. Mills.